Hi, I'm Elise. My sister once told me I lost everything, that I'd always be the fragile one, the forgotten one. But she didn't just say it, she made it true. For years, behind my back, she rewrote our parents' legacy, erased my name from their memories, and stood over the ashes like she'd won. They said I was unstable, bitter, alone, but they never expected me to fight back, not with fire, but with proof. And when I did, I bought the one thing she always wanted. Not revenge, something bigger. Want to know what it was? I pulled into the church parking lot with the kind of stillness that only comes from holding too much in. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, I was unraveling. The early spring sun cast long shadows on the stone steps, where black suits and somber dresses gathered in quiet clusters. I adjusted my muted gray dress, checked my reflection once in the rearview mirror, eyes dull, lips pressed. Nothing to fix. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I stepped out, clutching a worn clutch that used to be my mother's. The smell of old leather and lavender perfume still clung to it. Even now, a few distant cousins glanced my way. No smiles, no frowns. Just that polite curiosity people reserve for family members they can't quite place, or ones they've already written off. I forced my feet forward, heels tapping softly against the stone. Inside the church, the air was heavy with incense and organ music. The kind of weight that presses down on your ribs. I slid into the last pew, far from the gilded front row. And that's when she arrived. The black SUV stopped right at the bottom of the steps. The driver opened her door, and out stepped Sable, sunglasses so dark they hid half her face, a tailored black coat that cinched perfectly at her waist. And those damn heels click, 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 like she was walking a runway instead of into a funeral. People turned. They smiled. They reached out to touch her shoulder, pat her hand, whisper their condolences. She nodded graciously, offering half smiles like communion wafers. Her eyes passed over me like I was an empty chair. Then just for a second she smirked. That tiny, razor-sharp smirk said everything. I'm still the one they love. The service began. The pastor spoke. I barely heard. My mind was still stuck on the smirk, the sound of her heels, the way the crowd had parted for her, like she was royalty returning to her throne. Then they asked for family to speak. And Sable stood. She moved with that signature poise she'd perfected since high school, back when she was prom queen, and I was the invisible girl sketching in the bleachers. She reached the podium, took a soft breath, and smiled like someone who had practiced this 100 times. My father, she began, was a man of quiet strength. He taught me loyalty, sacrifice, and what it meant to show up when it matters. That word sacrifice hit me like a slap. Sable went on about his integrity, his long hours, the lessons learned. People nodded. Some dabbed their eyes. And then she paused. I just wish, she said slowly, that everyone who should be here had been there when he needed them most. There was a murmur, a shift in energy, and not everyone, she added, has earned the right to mourn. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was measured, cutting. All heads turned toward me. No one said my name. They didn't have to. My stomach dropped. I felt like a child again. A scolded child in a crowded room, with no chair to sit in. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just sat there and took it. After the service, I slipped out a side exit and made my way around the church toward the reception hall, hoping to avoid any more humiliation. But someone was already waiting. My mother, she stood by the rose bushes, arms folded, eyes steely. You knew what she was going to say, I asked. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering whether I even deserved a response. You haven't been around? Elise, she said. You don't get to come in after years and expect warm welcomes. But I called. I wrote. You never. She cut me off. We moved on. Maybe you should too. Her voice wasn't cruel. It was worse than that. It was flat. I was no longer her daughter in any way that mattered. I walked away. Not fast. Not angry. Just finished. Later that night, I found myself scrolling through my phone in the car, still parked in front of the house I grew up in. I didn't even know what I was looking for. And there it was, a clip already circulating on Facebook. Sable at the podium. The caption, a daughter's brave words at her father's funeral. It had thousands of views, dozens of comments. She's so poised, Powerful. One of the strongest eulogies I've ever heard. And then, a comment that said, "Who's the woman she was talking about?" Someone tagged me. My fingers went cold. I couldn't even remember breathing. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and stared ahead at the house. Its windows were dark. Its lights were off. It wasn't home anymore. I sat there, hands shaking, vision blurred. I had come to bury my father, but what they'd really done was bury me. And I'd walked right into it. The house was too quiet. I had returned from the funeral a week ago, and still, not a single word from anyone. No messages, no missed calls, no knock on the door. It was as if I had died instead. I tried to keep busy organizing cabinets that didn't need organizing, scrubbing the stovetop, even though I hadn't cooked in days. But silence has a way of following you. It clings to your thoughts. It sneaks in when the sun starts to set. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No one from the family had reached out. Not even a text asking if I'd made it home safe. I wasn't forgotten. I was being erased deliberately. That realization landed in my chest like a stone. I was brewing a second cup of coffee, late in the afternoon, when I heard the knock. Not a tap-tap. It was firm, like someone who needed to be heard. I peeked through the curtain. Ms. Adeline. She used to sit with my father when his hands trembled too much to button his shirts. She'd bring him banana bread, knit him socks, and hum church songs under her breath. I hadn't seen her since before the hospital stays became too frequent to count. I opened the door, unsure whether to hug her or brace myself. "Can I come in?" "Sweetheart," she asked, holding a cloth-wrapped bundle in both hands. I stepped aside without a word. She sat at the kitchen table, placed the bundle down gently, and began unwrapping it. Underneath the worn cloth was a dented metal box, smoke stains at the corners, the latch half melted. "Found this behind the shed," she said. "Still smells like kerosene." Guess she thought she got it all. I asked, but I already knew. "Ms. Adeline" didn't answer. She just looked at me, eyes soft but steady. She didn't know I was still coming by. "Cleaning up." It wasn't locked. I took it. I opened the box slowly. The metal creaked. Inside were photos Dad and me on the dock, a faded Polaroid of our first camping trip, even a crayon drawing I made in 3rd grade that he'd kept all these years, and tucked beneath them papers. I reached for the folder marked Trust Revision, June 2022. My hands shook as I opened it. The first few pages were scorched at the edges, but still readable. Dad had rewritten his will. He had split the estate evenly. My name, Elise, was written in his strong, looping handwriting, circled, underlined. Twice, another document, a journal page, detailed his worry. "She's isolating me," he had written, turning everyone against Elise. But Elise is the one who listens. I covered my mouth. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The anger came first. She knew. Sable knew about this. That's why she tried to destroy it. Why she smiled at the funeral. She believed she had buried every trace of me, literally. I spent the next hour reading every page, tracing every signature. Some were incomplete. Others burned beyond saving. But the intent was clear. He had tried. He wanted me to know I mattered. The sun dipped low outside the window. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the fading glow, reading the pages over and over like scripture. Then I remembered something. A year before he died, Sable had plastered her social media with photos her caring for Dad, making him soup, massaging his hands. She captioned one, "Doing what daughters do." But I remembered the phone calls. How she rushed me off when I tried to check in. How the nurses never returned my calls. I pulled out my old phone, still logged into my voicemail. There it was, a message from a nurse named Helen, dated just 2 months before he passed. "Hi, Elise. I'm sorry I can't talk long. I just wanted to say your father asked for you often. I think he's afraid. There's something off here. Call me when you can." The message had never been opened. And now Helen was long gone. Sable had fired her, said she wasn't aligned with the family's care plan. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing against my chest. She had rewritten the narrative, played the role of the sacrificial daughter, painted me as the ghost who abandoned him, and she'd done it all while making sure no one could prove otherwise. I picked up the phone again and called Liam, a law school friend who now handled estate cases. He listened quietly, then sighed. "Elise, if there's no signed, notarized copy of that revision. It's going to be tough, almost impossible. The court won't go on intent alone. What about the journal? I asked. Helpful, but not enough to override a filed will. You'd need testimony, documents, proof of fraud or undue influence. I thanked him and hung up. Then I just sat there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to her house and throw the box at her perfect porch. But rage was her currency, and I couldn't play by her rules. If I wanted to win, I had to think differently. I opened the journal one last time, flipped to the back page, and there it was, his handwriting. Sharp, deliberate, unmistakable. If she controls the truth, she'll erase her sister. Fight quietly, but fight. I closed the cover slowly, pressed it against my chest, then whispered, I will. 2 days after the box, I stood outside the old house in Somerville, clutching the keys like they might burn through my palm. The driveway was cracked, the bushes overgrown. The porch swing hung still, creaking in the breeze like it remembered something I didn't. It felt smaller than I remembered. Emptier, not just in furniture, but in presence. The neighbor, Mr. Holloway, waved from across the lawn. She left fast, he called. Didn't even take the attic keys. Didn't look back once. I nodded, not really replying. That sounded like her. Inside, it smelled of dust, lemon cleaner, and something else time. Maybe the kind of smell that clings to old quilts and untouched books. Each room looked frozen, chairs still pulled back from the table. A mug with lipstick on the rim sat in the sink. But the house no longer belonged to anyone. I wandered until I stood at the base of the attic ladder. The pull string dangled like an accusation. The last time I'd been up there, I was 13, hiding from a thunderstorm with a flashlight and a bag of marshmallows. I pulled the string and climbed. The attic groaned under my weight, boards creaking like they were warning me. Dust floated in streaks of afternoon light cutting through the single window. Old trunks, brittle photo albums, tangled Christmas lights, each item a fragment of some family myth we'd once believed in. I pushed aside a bin marked Sable's College, do not touch, and nearly tripped over a taped cardboard box shoved beneath a tarp. It was labeled in sharp black marker, Legal 2023. My pulse kicked. I knelt and peeled the tape. The flaps opened with a papery rasp. Inside were a handful of mini cassette tapes, a worn dictaphone, and an envelope. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, slipped the first tape in, and pressed play. Static. Then, his voice. Low. Tired. But him? I want it changed before July. She deserves equal say. Sable's not to interfere. The room spun slightly. I pressed the recorder to my ear, trying to absorb every word. Another voice, his lawyer. I think asked about medical proxies. I trust Elise, Dad said. If Sable lies again, I'll have no choice but to name Elise instead. My throat closed. I let the tape keep playing while I opened the envelope. A folded note, scrawled hastily. If you find this, she failed to burn everything. There are more truths here than she ever wanted you to hear. I reached for another tape. This one started slower. Him, again, talking about a Christmas from a few years back. I paused. I remembered that year. I'd planned to fly home, but Sable called last minute, said Mom had slipped down the stairs, twisted her ankle. Said they were taking her to urgent care and Christmas dinner was off. I canceled my flight. Found out later, Mom never left the house. There had been no fall. Dad's voice on the tape broke through my thoughts. She didn't want Elise home. Said it would complicate things with the lawyer visit. Claimed it was a family emergency. It wasn't, he coughed. The tape skipped. Then, she's setting the stage, painting herself as the only one who stayed. It's not just about control. It's about inheritance. About image. I pulled my knees to my chest. The attic felt warmer now. Tighter. Like the house itself didn't want me hearing this. I listened to every second. Every lie she told. Every step she took to rewrite the story we were supposed to share. And Dad, he saw it. He tried to stop it. Another tape 6 was just 10 minutes long. But I played it 3 times. He talked about the revision process. How Sable intercepted mail. How she started scheduling his appointments without asking. She thinks if she's the only one near me, no one can challenge the narrative. He said, but I'm not gone yet. I see her. I see it all. Tape 7. I hesitated before hitting play. Something about the label smudged ink. but I could make out 2 words. Final thought. The tape clicked. If you're listening to this, Dad said slowly, it means she won. I froze. I tried. I left what I could. But if she found this first, if she destroyed what mattered most. Elise, I'm sorry. I never stopped loving you. Never believed what she said. He paused. Don't let her version be the only one. Don't let her erase you. The tape ended. I didn't move for a long time. Outside, a breeze rattled the attic window. Inside, all I could hear was his voice, like it was stitched into the walls, into the bones of this house. I stood, finally, tucked the tapes into my bag, looked out the window into the backyard where we used to play flashlight tag. And I said it aloud, not caring who heard. Not yet, Dad. But even a lie, when said often enough, begins to rot everything around it, including the people who spread it. I parked in front of the Franklin Cafe around 11:15. Same as I'd done 100 times before. Nothing had changed. Same red and white awning. Same chalkboard sign advertising peach cobbler and ham biscuits. But the moment I stepped inside, the air shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No gasps. No falling forks. Just a quiet hush. A pair of older women at the corner table stopped mid-bite. Someone near the register leaned in, whispering behind a menu. That's her. I didn't need them to finish the sentence. I already knew what came next. The liar, the disappointment, the girl who made a scene at the funeral. I walked past them, chin high, toward the back table by the window. It used to be where Mama and I sat, before the sickness twisted her soft edges into something sharp. I slid into the booth, opened my notebook, and tried to focus. But my eyes caught on something framed near the register. A poster, a smiling picture of Megan, holding a paintbrush in one hand, standing in front of a canvas covered in blues and golds. Above it, honoring the Megan Memorial Fund for the Arts. Below, founded on the legacy of Echo in Color, a program close to her heart. I stared. Echo in Color was mine. A program I had spent 2 summers building for underprivileged students. Art therapy, storytelling, memory collage. I'd presented it at county council meetings, registered the domain. Mama even proofread the grant letters before she stopped remembering how to use a microwave. Megan hadn't just stolen my name, she'd planted it in this town like it had always belonged to her. The bell over the door jingled. Megan. Hair perfect, lipstick fresh. Dressed like a Southern Living magazine had thrown up in her car. She spotted me instantly, but played surprised. Oh, Jombine. What a coincidence. I didn't answer. She ordered a chai, then made her way to my booth, leaned in, too close. You look tired. These last few weeks have been hard on everyone. Huh. I shut my notebook. You sent that letter. She blinked, playing innocent. What letter? Don't insult me. The one about the trust. You mailed it anonymously, hoping I'd crack in front of the lawyer. She gave a half smile, like I was a puppy that had barked at its own reflection. If I had, she said slowly, you'd never find out. You're not exactly FBI material. A beat passed. I stood up. You're standing on my name, I said clearly, and I will take it back. She didn't flinch. What name? She said. The one nobody here remembers except you. Then she winked. A full, deliberate wink, and walked off toward the counter, where she chatted up the barista like nothing happened. I stood there, fists curled so tight, my nails left tiny moons in my palms. I didn't scream, didn't flip tables, didn't tear the poster off the wall. But inside, something shifted. Not a snap, a compression, like heat being pulled into a single, dense core. 20 minutes later, I sat in my truck, engine off, air conditioning on low. My hands trembled not from fear, but from how hard it had been to stay calm. In the rearview mirror, I saw myself the way I used to look when Mama brushed my hair, delicate, unsure, but that girl didn't exist anymore. A memory floated up. Megan, when we were 9, whispering in the dark, you'll always be my shadow. That's what sisters do. One stands in the light. She'd meant it as a promise, or maybe a threat. No one tells you revenge is mostly silence. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of sweet tea and my laptop open. I drafted an email to the director of the Franklin Gallery, attached a photo of my original project proposal, dated 2 years before Megan's fund appeared. I also attached a high-resolution photo of the cafe poster, but I didn't hit send. Not yet. Instead, I labeled the folder Artifacts and saved it to an external drive. Megan wanted applause. Spotlights. Community grants. Let her have them for now. Let her keep smiling for the cameras. Let her shake hands and cut ribbons. She hadn't seen what I'd really built. What I'd been saving. What I wasn't going to burn just to make a point. I leaned back in my chair, watching the glow of the screen reflect off the window. Outside, the town was winding down. Porch lights flickered on. Kids tossed basketballs under street lamps. Everything looked the same, but something was coming. Some warnings aren't screamed. They're carved quietly into the path of whoever thought they'd never be caught. It wasn't the lie that hurt. It was how easily it fit into the version of me they already believed. But even a lie, when said often enough, begins to rot everything around it, including the people who spread it. Exactly 1 week after that cafe confrontation, my phone buzzed at 7:13 in the morning. I was halfway through my coffee, seated by the window with a notepad in my lap, making a list I'd titled Things They Can't Take From Me. The message was from Sable. Mom wants you at the birthday dinner. Be civil. No, hello? No, please. Just an order dressed up like an olive branch. It stunk of setup. But part of me wanted the confrontation. Sometimes the only way to draw a line is to walk straight up to it. The reservation was for 6:30, at the kind of place our mother loved: white tablecloths, a breeze off the harbor, and enough soft jazz to make every lie sound elegant. When I arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the boats gold and silver. A long table sat near the railing, half full. My mother was already there, dressed in pale pink, her hair styled like she'd stepped out of an old perfume ad. Sable sat to her right, of course, her throne. I took the seat at the far end. I didn't wave. We ate seafood salad and toasted to love and resilience. Strangers at other tables smiled politely, unaware that the air between us could have sliced through steel. Sable raised her glass. To our mother, whose grace holds us all together. And may Elise, she smiled across the table, find the strength to stand steady. Dad always said you had a soft heart. Bless you. The insult was wrapped in silk. The room chuckled lightly. I didn't chuckle. Instead, I reached under the table and pulled out a manila envelope. I stood slowly deliberate, grounded, and walked the length of the table, my heels clicking. A metronome of reckoning. I set the envelope between the water pitcher and the shrimp cocktail platter. Then maybe, I said, he left this for me to remind you how wrong you are. Sable blinked. Her smile faltered. I opened the flap and pulled out 3 documents copies, not originals, and a printout of a transcription. I didn't raise my voice. You forged his signature on the Second Amendment to the trust. I said plainly. You isolated him during hospice care, refused calls. You told the nursing staff I was unstable. Mother's hand trembled around her wine glass. I unfolded the final page. And this is from the audio recording I found last week. Dad's words. If she lies again, I'll name Elise instead. Gasps. One of the cousins dropped his fork. I looked directly at my mother. This isn't about money. It's about truth, and I won't let either of you rewrite mine. Sable let out a soft, incredulous laugh. You always were dramatic. I didn't blink. Keep pushing, I said quietly. And I promise you, I won't just expose this to the family. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. The table buzzed behind me, soft arguments, shocked whispers. I didn't care. The streetlights were just flickering on as I stepped outside. The salty air sharper than usual. I exhaled, letting the breath slice through the knot in my chest. At the corner, I stopped. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. No text, just a link. The subject line read, "You need to see what she's really hiding." I stared at the screen. Whatever it wasn't over. The moment I clicked the link, I knew I was about to cross into something I couldn't walk back from. The file was a single PDF, scanned, slightly blurred at the edges. Hospital letterhead, sealed with a digital signature. The title read, "Suppressed. Not for family distribution." My breath stilled. The date matched the week Sable told me. Dad's just tired. Nothing serious. But the first line beneath the diagnosis tore through the fog. Stage the 3rd, pancreatic carcinoma. Prognosis. 4-6 months? My chest went hollow. He was dying. And I didn't even know. Not because he didn't want me to know, but because someone made sure I didn't. I stared at that line until it stopped looking like text and started to feel like bone. The last time I spoke to him, it was over video. His skin looked washed out. His voice faded halfway through a sentence. I'd asked if he needed anything. He'd smiled and said, "Just time." Sable had swooped in moments later. "He's just under the weather. Let him rest." And I believed her. Now I knew she kept us away. She locked us out of his last months like it was some twisted gift she didn't want to share. It was past midnight, but I didn't wait. I forwarded the file to Dean Wexler, my attorney. The subject line was simple. "We need to talk." He called before the sun rose. "We have enough?" he said without hesitation. "Fraud, medical suppression, misuse of power of attorney. We'll initiate a formal request for investigation this morning." My voice came out clear. "Steady. Do it." Byton. I was at the courthouse. I'd thrown on black slacks and a navy blazer, my armor, stitched from control and caffeine. The clerk behind the glass glanced at the documents. Then at me. "You're not the first sibling we've seen file something like this," she said. "But you might be the first who came in prepared." I didn't smile. I signed. I filed. I walked out into the hot Charleston light, feeling like I'd shifted something tectonic. That afternoon, I worked in silence. No music, no phone calls, just printed out copies of everything, labeled each one, and locked them in the fireproof safe under my kitchen sink. I was done playing catch-up. At 6:41 p.m. Me says. My phone rang. Sable. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "You really want to do this?" she asked, her voice tight but calm. "You want all of this to go public? You want the neighbors whispering? You want Mother dragged through this again?" I leaned against the counter. "What I want is for Dad's truth to matter. You made sure he died without it. That ends now." A pause, then a low, mocking laugh. "You never did understand the cost of playing hero, and you never understood what it means to lose someone honestly," I said. There was nothing left to say. I hung up. The city went quiet that night. The kind of quiet where even your breathing sounds like defiance. But just before dawn, a soft thud at my door broke it. I opened it to find a manila envelope taped dead center. No return address. No note. Inside was a single photograph. Me and Dad on the beach. I was 10. He was barefoot, holding a kite string, laughing like he had all the time in the world. On the back, written in Sharpie, 6 words that chilled me to the core. "You were always his favorite." That's why I had to be the one in control. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop against the nightstand. By the time I reached for it, there were over 50 unread messages, some from coworkers, others from numbers I didn't recognize. And all of them had the same 3 words. "You okay?" Elise. Confused. I tapped open the first news link someone sent me. Heir at war. Family insider claims. Bitter daughter seeks vengeance over inheritance. A photo of me clearly pulled from my company website sat beside a bolded headline that bled malice. The quotes were out of context. The details twisted just enough to make me look unhinged. By the time I walked into the office, I could feel the shift. Eyes darted away. A few whispered. Even our receptionist wouldn't meet my gaze. At 9:14 sharp, my boss called me in. "Elise," she said gently, "we support you, but you need to get ahead of this. This is everywhere." I nodded, jaw locked, throat tight. I understand, but I also knew Sable had launched this. She always knew how to weaponize perception. When we were kids, she'd cry on command and get me sent to my room. Now, she had PR firms, journalists, influence, and zero conscience. I left the office early and called Dean from the parking lot. "She's using a spin team?" he said. No hesitation. "Name's familiar. They've been involved in a few dirty campaigns in D.C. Want me to dig?" I didn't even have to answer. Instead, I went home and opened every deposition, court filing, and statement from the estate case. One line stood out again and again. A testimony from a former nurse who claimed Dad was lucid and adamant about changing the will in favor of Sable. But something didn't sit right. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. I started digging deeper. It took hours, but I found it. The nurse's maiden name matched the beneficiary on a modest trust fund created 2 years ago, right after Dad's second hospitalization. The trustee, a shell corporation connected to Sable's firm. She hadn't just lied. She paid someone to rewrite history. The rage didn't come fast, it came slow, steady, like oil creeping toward a flame. That night, I sat across from a local news anchor I knew from college. He studied the folder I handed him. If we run this, Elise, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Good, I said. Let her know I don't fear the light anymore. He nodded slowly. We air tomorrow. And we did. The segment ran for nearly 7 minutes. Screenshots, timelines, bank records, audio files of Sable's voice layered with faux concern. I just want what Dad wanted. Social media lit up within minutes. Former family friends messaged me. Old neighbors shared the video. Even my childhood piano teacher commented. We always wondered what really happened. Thank you for telling the truth. And for the first time, I felt the tide turning, not just for me, but for Dad's name. His truth, that night, as I was washing a wine glass, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I hit play. Sable's voice slithered through the speaker. You're making enemies you can't handle. Elise, walk away now, or I'll finish what I started. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, stared at the screen, and pressed delete. No reply. No fear, just resolve. The next morning, my phone rang again. A number from the courthouse. This is Clerk Madigan. Ms. Langley, you've been subpoenaed. Miss? Sable Cross is filing a defamation suit. You're due in court in 10 days. I didn't flinch. Perfect, I said, almost smiling. Let's do this in the open. 2 weeks had passed, but the courtroom buzzed like it was opening night on Broadway. People filled the gallery, neighbors, reporters, even distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. I walked in with my spine straight, my breath slow, and my heart quietly bracing. Sable sat across the room, her hair perfectly styled, lips pursed, expression unreadable. The only thing louder than the tension was the silence between us. My attorney stood and began. Exhibit after exhibit. Dates, bank transfers, altered signatures. Then came the email chain subpoenaed, verified where Sable instructed their family's former estate attorney to bury the codicil that contradicts the current directive. That email landed like a bomb. A ripple of whispers moved through the gallery. Then I stood. The judge gave a slight nod. I reached into my folder and pulled out something we'd been saving for just this moment, a letter, yellowed at the edges. Written in what was supposed to be my mother's gentle script, it had been discovered during estate inventory, conveniently affirming that Sable should be left sole executor, dated just weeks before Mom's death. But something about it had never sat right with me. An expert handwriting analyst testified. Not only was the signature traced, it was copied from an earlier birthday card. And the writing, a mixture of forged strokes. The courtroom gasped again. Even Sable's lawyer blinked hard, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. My pulse pounded, but I kept my voice even as I stepped closer to the witness box. I looked straight at her. Did Mom ever ask you to look after me? Or did she beg you not to destroy me? Sable didn't answer. For the first time in our lives, she didn't have a comeback. Her eyes didn't rise to meet mine. Her lips didn't move. The silence, this time, wasn't power. It was defeat. The judge ordered a full review of the estate, pending a criminal fraud investigation. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just picked up my bag, nodded at the bailiff, and walked out with steady feet. Outside, the flashes came like thunder reporters shouting my name. Mics thrust forward, but I didn't stop. I didn't give them a quote. I had said everything that needed saying where it counted. Later that afternoon, I drove out to our old house. The gravel still crunched under the tires the same way it did when I was 17, sneaking back past curfew. The oak tree in the front yard had grown wider, stronger. The mailbox leaned, still slightly crooked like always. I sat in the car for a while, watching the wind move through the leaves. She tried to take everything, I whispered to myself, but some things you can't steal back. I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and memories. I wandered through the rooms, not touching anything, just remembering. Then I saw it. A single envelope on the hallway table. No stamp, no address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo Dad and I on the beach. I couldn't have been more than 10. He was laughing. I was barefoot, mid-skip. The tide behind us, the sun burning gold. On the back, written in thick black marker. We're not done, Elise. I stood still for a long time. Then, without a word, I locked the front door behind me. This time, from the inside. The letter sat untouched on my kitchen counter for weeks. I'd passed by it every morning with my coffee in hand, every night after washing the dishes. Part of me thought I might read it one day, tear it open, trace every word, searching for one last thread of meaning in her handwriting. But yesterday, after all the court dust had finally settled, I walked out back with it and a box of matches. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I set it in the fire pit, struck a match, and watched the flames curl around the edges like fingers reclaiming something never meant to last. I've spent too long trying to understand her words, I whispered. It's my turn now. That night, I cleaned the spare room I used to call the junk space and turned it into a little studio. Nothing fancy, just an easel, some tubes of paint I hadn't opened in years, and a stack of blank canvases. At first, the brush felt awkward in my hand, but with each stroke, something inside me loosened. Within a few days, I began inviting women from the neighborhood, many around my age or older, to come paint with me on Sunday afternoons. No sign-ups, no pressure, just open doors and a pot of coffee. Word spread quicker than I expected. Soon, a retired librarian, a widowed florist, and even a former biology teacher started showing up regularly. We laughed more than we painted. One afternoon, a local journalist visited after hearing about the group. A week later, my name appeared in a Sunday feature. The sister who rebuilt her life with a paintbrush. I didn't frame the article, but I clipped it and tucked it in a drawer with the things I didn't want to forget. Then came the day I returned to the care facility where Mom spent her final months. It wasn't planned. I'd driven past it on the way to the hardware store and found myself pulling in. Parking, walking through the front doors with a strange kind of peace guiding me. The receptionist looked up, curious, but a nurse nearby gasped softly and stepped forward. "You're Elise," she said. "Your mother. She used to brag about you when no one else was around to hear." My throat tightened. She did, all the time. She'd hold your old paintings like they were gold. The nurse smiled. She said you were the brave one. Said you'd always land on your feet. I thanked her, and for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. Later that week, I sat down with my attorney and transferred a portion of the estate money into a new trust, a scholarship in my mother's name for young artists who had no family support. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from the foster system who painted bold, surreal skies. We met briefly, just the two of us in the studio. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," I said gently. "You remind me of someone I might have been. If someone had believed in me a little sooner." She smiled, and for the first time, I felt something that looked a lot like closure. The day I went back to the beach, the one from that photo Sable left taped to my door. The sky was soft and gray. No tourists, just waves rolling like time. I brought a box with me filled with old paintbrushes, dried tubes of pigment, and a single rose I'd saved from Mom's service. I stepped to the shoreline, opened the box, and one by one, scattered everything into the sea, not to forget, but to forgive myself for holding on too tightly. The water carried it all out in silence, and as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, I sat down on the sand, feeling the wind curl through my hair. I thought about Sable, about Mom, about the years lost and the years still ahead. Somewhere between grief and grace, I realized this wasn't the ending I'd imagined. It was better. There's something no courtroom can give, you something no inheritance can replace. It's peace, and peace doesn't arrive like a winning verdict. It shows up slowly, often in the silence after the storm, when you've finally decided to stop carrying what was never yours to hold. If you're listening to this and you've ever been lied to by someone you trusted, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the family from falling apart, I hope you know this. You're not weak for letting go. You're strong for surviving. I spent years chasing validation from people who only saw me as convenient or inconvenient. But healing didn't come from proving them wrong. It came from choosing to be right with myself. So let me ask you, what's the one thing you've been holding on to, thinking it'll bring closure? And what if you're the one who gets to write the ending now? If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below with a simple one, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't hit home, that's okay too. Drop a comment and let me know why. I want to hear from you. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about strength, truth, and the quiet power of moving forward, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the right story finds us exactly when we need it. Thank you for spending your time with me. I'll see you in the next chapter.